right, good morning. I'll go ahead and call the school board workshop into order at this time as we have 9 o'clock on computer time. And colleagues, good morning again. And as we've always done in workshops, we'll just go through each item. And I'll try to pause and I'll try to see if anyone has a comment. If I miss you, please just let me know and we'll just move through every item. Superintendent, same thing for you and your staff. If there's something that you would like to present, please just let me know. All right, so as we move through the agenda, we have opening, we have the approval of the agenda, we have no recognitions and no visitors. If we go to section 5, we do have some administrative personnel appointments. 5.1, appointment of director, exceptional student education and student services recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.2, appointment of assistant principal 1, Choctawhatchee High School recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.3, appointment of assistant principal 1, Niceville High School recommended by the superintendent for approval. 5.4, appointment of assistant principal 2, Destin Middle School recommended by the superintendent for approval. And then 5.5, appointment of assistant principal 2 at Riverside Elementary School recommended by the superintendent for approval. All right, so then we move on to public comment, item 6.1, and so I've been handed a blue card for this morning's workshop, and it's for Mr. Patrick Ryan. Good morning, Mr. Ryan.
Hey, good morning, Dr.
Come on forward, and yes, sir, come forward, please, and I think you're probably familiar with the rules of order and so forth, and we'll give you 4 minutes, and when you're ready, just go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I don't think it's going to take that long. I believe you all saw the email I sent yesterday. It was a legal opinion, or what they call an advisory opinion,
Okay, very good.
from the Department of State's General Counsel at the Division of Elections about Ms. Ivanchek's question from last Monday night about non-public financing of referendums. I am not an attorney. You have one here. So my recommendation, of course, is, like I said in my email, to then turn that advisory opinion over to Mr. McGinnis and let him answer whatever questions you have.
All right.
I'm going to be out of town Monday, so I just wanted to appear today to see if there were any questions about where the opinion came from or how I came about it, that's all.
Well, no, but I appreciate you asking for the opinion. And
No
Mr.
problem.
McInnes, I know that you and I have talked that you're going to be taking a look at that. So I don't know if it'll be something that you can report on Monday night, but we'll look.
I haven't seen the document
Sure.
you're talking about yet.
But we'll look forward to a coming report.
Yes, sir.
So you can let us know how that law works. Any questions, board members, or comments? All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Ryan.
much.
Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, so moving on now to Section 7, Committee and Staff Reports. 7.1, in-county travel paid for the period of May 23rd through June the 5th, 2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon. And then 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of May 23rd, June 5, 2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. And that brings us to Section 8, Consent Agenda. 8.1, of course, is the approval. 8.2, approval of the minutes of student disciplinary hearing of June the 6th, 2019, minutes of the workshop meeting of June the 6th, 2019, minutes of the regular meeting of June 10th, 2019, all recommended by Superintendent Marcus Chambers for approval. 8.3, appropriation of District 1 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Shalimar Elementary School for flooring in the amount of $8,074.64, presented by Lamar White and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
I just have a question.
sir.
Mr. Wyndham, on this particular tile, again, is that the one that we're moving to, that's the high grade tile, like, okay. Oh, this is carpet tile? Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so then moving on to 8.4, appropriation of District 2 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Elliott Point Elementary School for classroom flooring in the amount of $10,626.25, presented by Mr. Dewey Destin and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.5, Budget Amendment Number 9, Fiscal Year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.6, monthly financial statement for May 2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.7, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.8, school donations, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.9, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for May 2019 totaling $26,367,645.13, and bank transfers for May 2019 totaling $6,265,000, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.10, fiscal year 2018-2019 inventories from all schools and departments, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.11, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a revised School Board Policy 02-17 purchasing procedures, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.12, ITB 19-08 canopy bid, district-wide, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I do have a
Yes, sir.
question regarding this now. This is the canopy bid that we talked about last year for canopies for the portables.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And obviously, the amount is way over what we kind of projected it would cost. Am I correct?
I think at the time, back in, I guess, late fall or beginning of January, there was a plan laid out that identified over a number of years. And again, this is about putting covered walkways on the portables that are in our schools, that may be laid out over a 4-year period of getting the process begun. I think the estimates that we used internally at that time are based on some work that had been done previously in small areas. But you're right, the low bid that came in was about a little under 3 times as expensive. And so what that does, in looking at that project, it absolutely slows down the rate at which we can do that. So I think there are some funds in our capital budget for the 18-19 school year for portable canopy covering. Obviously, that won't go nearly as far as we had hoped or projected. And then I think maybe I'll say compound matters, but I know that the school board's focus has been on school safety. And so, as is the case always where you've got limited resources and priorities, I think we brought this bid before you today, not necessarily with the understanding that we can get everything done that we had planned to get done, but certainly wanted to at least make the board aware of it.
And might I add a comment to that? I believe I was in the audience, not in this chair, when that discussion happened, and a previous board member put a significant amount of funding in that project, I believe. Now that our focus has shifted to safety rather than other things, and with the understanding that now the bid is 3 times what we thought at that point in time, is it appropriate, is it possible that we could reel that money back in and put it towards our safety initiative? Notwithstanding and understanding that keeping our students from being wet is important, but maybe not as important as keeping them safe every day in this day and age. Could we consider that?
We discussed this at the construction meeting.
Very good.
Oh,
And
okay.
I believe if memory supports me correctly, I made the motion, seconded by Ms. Thrush. Victoria and I discussed it, and I would be supportive of putting this off for a year and directing this money towards the securities. And if the rest of the board concurs, then I would suggest that we
All right.
we consider that at
So-
Monday night's meeting.
So I'm thinking I hear a motion, and I think I understand there's a second.
Yep, I would say yes.
Well, I do want to just still interject there because, I think the biggest issue with the canopy was not necessarily general education students, but EVD students.
It was.
So, I'm like Dr. Kelly. I mean, I'm all about wanting to keep our kids dry, but at the same time, safety is definitely a huge component of what we're dealing with. But at the same time, how many classrooms portables did we have that were EBD that we would have been looking at?
And I'd have to defer to Mr. Horton, but in EBD is one of the categories that we are looking at, but just ESC in general, so there's several other classrooms that may be out in those portables.
Or yes, I think ESE was the other one.
But you may or may not
Yes,
know
sir.
off the top of
I
the
don't
head.
have
Those
that exact
audiences
number,
might be
Mr. Bryant, but
shifting
I'll
as
find
well.
it for you back.
I think
Well,
those
it may be
populations might be
something then
moving.
that you could be prepared to bring Monday night.
Surely. And one of the things, I'm
and-
sorry.
And should there be a motion, and should there be a second, then that would be the appropriate time to have that discussion.
You know, and the rationale that my esteemed colleague voiced a moment ago about we want to keep them dry, but we want to keep them alive even better, that
That's right.
applies to ESE students too. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that we need to redirect the money towards security at this point of the game.
Okay.
And I do want to stand corrected. I did say EBD, I meant ESE, so, thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, so then we'll anticipate that for Monday evening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Anything else, colleagues, on that one? All right, then let's move
I think,
forward.
Dr.
Yes, sir.
White, just for
Yes, sir.
clarification, so is this going to stay on consent just to authorize the bid,
Good
or does it
question.
need to move to discussion?
Good question.
I don't know if they need just to have this bid authorized,
So-
but they don't necessarily have to spend it. I'm not
Right,
sure.
so would you like to move this item to discussion, Mr. Destin?
That's exactly what
Okay.
my plan was.
All right, thank you, Mr. McInnes. Anything else, colleagues?
That's good.
All right, so moving on now to 8.13, renewal of ITB 17-07, new and recapped tire services, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.14, tag on bid ITB 19,000 DST-VT, commodity food processing, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.15, tag on bid RFP 191502, food processing USDA commodities, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.16, exempted purchase over $25,000, advanced ed, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.17, exempted purchase over $25,000, Discovery Education, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.18, exempted purchase over $25,000, Achieve 3,000, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, Service Agreement Number 20-05, David Bricker, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. There are several of these, colleagues. All right. 8.20, Service Agreement Number 20-11, Mariana Goolsby, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, Service Agreement Number 20-13, Brandy Tucker, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.22, Service Agreement Number 20-14, Roy D. Wingo, Jr., presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.23, Service Agreement Number 20-15, Aaron Hackle, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.24, Service Agreement Number 20-16, Bryce Milton, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.25, Service Agreement Number 20-17, Connor Adams, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.26, Service Agreement Number 20-18, Jamie Fields, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.27, Service Agreement Number 20-19, Johari Harris, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.28, Service Agreement Number 20-20, Joshua Windett, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.29, Service Agreement Number 20-21, Kenneth Rhodes, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.30, Service Agreement Number 20-22, Sasha Hooper, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, 8.31, Vehicle Maintenance Inspection and Repair Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Northwest Florida State College, presented by Mr. Jay McInnes, Program Director Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.32, School Fire and Life Safety Inspection Reports for all Okaloosa County School District facilities for 2018-2019, to be submitted to the State Fire Marshal, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
So you know we received this report.
Right.
I do want Mr. Horton to come up if you have any questions, but I would like to say that where anywhere in this report, if there's a finding, especially if something needs to be fixed, Mr. Horton is ensuring with the principals that work orders are in so that any of these items will be fixed, but you also may have some specific questions as well, and Mr. Horton may have additional information.
All right, colleagues, that's our cue. Anything?
I'll just say, you'll see our inspectors actually would be here today, but he's in training to recertify to continue to be our inspector. But you'll see these, they occur throughout the school year, so you might see one dated February, so many of those issues are already taken care of, and so we work those
Very
and try to make sure everything's up to speed. But in a school district this size, there are always bound to be some exceptions out there we need to take a look at, so we're always doing that.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, then moving on to 8.33, Sale and Disposal of Surplus Property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.34, Renewal of Lease Extension Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, and Northwest Florida Visionaries Incorporated, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.35, Self-Help Project for Fundraising and Planning Only, Football Soccer Field Lights for Lewis School, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.36, Self-Help Project for Fundraising and Planning Only, Niceville Ruckle Tennis Center located at Ruckle Middle School to build a ball wall, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended for approval by the Superintendent. 8.37, Renewal Agreement for School Resource Officer Program between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Sheriff of Okaloosa County for 2019-2020, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent MIS, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And Mr. Horton, would you just give us a brief review of increases, changes?
Yes, sir, Mr. Desson. So first of all, we really appreciate the Sheriff's Office and the best SRO program in the state. Captain Pecos here today representing the Sheriff's Office. So we did meet with them a couple of weeks ago, and so what you'll see in this agreement is a continuation, obviously, of an SRO in every school, 2 SROs in our high schools, our 4 larger high schools, and Baker as well. There was an increase of 1 field supervisor in this contract going forward to next year. From a school district operated schools perspective. So all of those pieces are very important for the operation of the SRO program. And then other than that, from the school district standpoint, there were no changes. So I'll have questions if you have any.
Any questions?
No, but I appreciate the Sheriff's Office also. They're picking up a substantial portion of the expense, so we appreciate their efforts for another year. They're doing a fine job on a very hard and difficult task.
Yes, sir.
And I would note, board members, this contract, as it has for years, is offered to our charter schools as well, so that they can meet the state requirements for those officers. And so those officers are included in the count. And then Ms. Scallon simply, as I understand it, invoices the charters, and they reimburse the district for their share of those costs.
Well, and I appreciate that comment, because given some of the news coming from Tallahassee, that there's a lot of oversight being projected out to school districts in Florida now concerning school safety, including charter schools. So I appreciate you sharing with us that that's included within our contract, and so that the public knows that that's also included in our contract with the sheriff's resource
And
officer.
that's been the practice of our district and our charter schools for a number of years. It has now become part of the law, and we were already in compliance with that.
Early on, very good. All right.
So we approved the Destin High School charter. So
question.
that will be one in the future when they get rolling, that will
Right,
go
they-
into this, right?
They will not be opening until the next
Yeah,
school year,
mhm.
so
So it'll
those
be that
services are
time.
not needed, and we're working on that contract right now. There'll be security provisions there, and they will be offered the same opportunity, yes, ma'am.
So I would assume that you're probably thinking 2 there as well, since it's a high school?
Well, it's based upon
Small.
head count.
Small,
Really
okay.
small to
Yeah.
start with.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay, thank you.
And it is just an option because, for example, the collegiate school at Northwest Florida handles it without the use of the SRO agreement.
right.
They have their own.
Yeah.
folks
But
on
they
it.
have security at the college.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
what I mean.
but
They
this
have
would
to
be,
Make
yeah.
the option available. They have their own program, which satisfies the law. The other charters take advantage of this program, and Destin can choose whether they want to do this program or have their own program.
And I would presume too that it would depend on where their final location is. They still, to my knowledge, haven't secured a location.
Mhm.
So depending upon where they locate, that might or might not be part of our issue.
But Dr. White, what you were talking about, as we're moving forward with our safety program, would this board be liable for charter schools as far as a safety situation? If something were, I mean,
As I
That's-
where does that
understand-
come in?
as I
That's been some of the
understand
rhetoric from Tallahassee,
the
but go ahead.
Revisions to the statute, what we have to be able to do is to show that we have offered these safety provisions and services to the charter schools. It's up to them how they choose to use them and how they implement them, but we do have an obligation to make sure they have the opportunity to use them.
Okay, that's our obligation, okay.
And I too would like to say, so as you know, a lot of work goes into this contract.
Right.
And I do want to thank Ms. Scallon, Mr. Horton, for the work that they've done into this contract. But I also would love to share and thank the sheriff and the sheriff's office for this partnership. And I think, as you know, there's literally not a day that goes by that there's not communication with the school district and the sheriff's department. And the cooperative nature of the sheriff's department is something that we just very much appreciate.
Very good. Thank you, Superintendent. All right, Mr. Horton, thank you, sir. All right, so now moving on to 8.38, renewal of joint agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office for the continued operation of an educational facility and canine training area on the Okaloosa Technical College and Choice High School campus, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent MIS, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.39, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of new School Board Policy 11-30, use of service animals, presented by Ms. Terry Schroeder, Program Director, Student Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I just
Yes,
have
sir.
one quick comment on this, and, you know, I was reading over this, and service animal is definitely defined, and I think that's a positive thing for, if there's any question about what is considered a service animal. I believe in Florida, it's a dog or a Shetland pony are the only certified service animals that are allowed, so I think this will help.
And those
Yes, sir.
definitions are consistent with the ADA and the
Right.
federal standards, so that we
Right.
pull directly from that.
Right.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, so moving on to 8.40, virtual instruction provider agreement between Edgenuity Incorporated and the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, presented by Ms. Christy Corbin, Assistant Principal, Okaloosa Online, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.41, agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, and Calvert Educational Services, LLC, for online educational products, presented by Mrs. Christy Corbin, Assistant Principal, Okaloosa Online, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.42, contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, and K-12 Florida, LLC, for Fuel Ed online educational products, presented by Mrs. Christy Corbin, Assistant Principal, Okaloosa Online, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.43, contract agreement between Panhandle Area Educational Consortium and the School Board of Okaloosa County, Florida, presented by Mrs. Christy Corbin, Assistant Principal, Okaloosa Online, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.44, Educational Services Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Okaloosa Academy Incorporated to provide services to students placed with the Department of Juvenile Justice in Okaloosa County, presented by Mrs. Terry Schroeder, Program Director of Student Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.45, Cooperative Service Agreement between the Florida State University and Okaloosa County School District, presented by Mrs. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.46, Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Comprehensive Head Start, submitted by Mrs. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.47, Agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the School Board of Walton County to provide ESE services to eligible Walton County students, presented by Mrs. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.48, IDEA Part B Entitlement 2019-20 Grant Application, and IDEA Part B Preschool Entitlement 2019-20 Grant Application, presented by Ms. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.49, Title I, Part D, Subpart 2, Local Programs for Neglected and Delinquent 2019-2020, presented by Ms. Amy Dale, Title I, 9 Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.50, Title II, Part A, Teacher and Principal Training and Recruiting Fund 2019-2020 Grant Application, presented by Ms. Ann Flanagan, Reading Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.51, Title IV, Part A, Florida Department of Education Project Application for 2019-2020, presented by Ms. Tammy Ellis, Science Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.52, Course Number Adoptions for 2019-2020 school year for Okaloosa Technical College, presented by Denise Berry, Curriculum Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.53, Extension of Agreement with TSA Consulting Group for Administrative Service of the OCSD 403B 457B plans, presented by Russ Frakes, Risk Management Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.54, Renewal of Florida School Board's Insurance Trust Membership and Property and Casualty Insurance Program, presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Risk Management Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Yes,
Dr.
sir.
White, if Russ could come up real quick, and, I've had the pleasure of working with Russ with Florida School Board Insurance Trust, and as y'all know, a couple of weeks ago, I did send y'all out a letter that we got from FSBIT on some additional savings that we were going to save up this year. So Russ, if you could just give us a
Yeah.
state of the union address for
Very,
those.
very good. I'll do so. Happy to do so. First of all, just to review, the Florida School Boards Insurance Trust is the organization affiliated with the Florida Association of School Boards through which we obtain our insurance coverage for our property and casualty program that provides various insurance policies that protect anything from our buildings and equipment, all of our vehicles, buses, maintenance vehicles, to the exposures that the district has with regard to workers' compensation or general liability coverage, anything the district may become liable for. They also offer risk management services, claims administration services, so all the claims that they have a staff of adjusters, nurses that actually do nurse case management work for our employees, with workers' compensation claims, and loss control services. Also bill review. They review all those medical bills that come in, reduce those, fee schedule them according to the workers' compensation statute, and save as much money for the district as possible. So that's really where we've been since we've been with them as full members since 2017, of course, and this is the renewal of that. This is an annual process that we look at each year, that renewal cycle that takes place. Just in general, in the insurance market, what we saw this year, you notice some of our premiums have increased. The insurance industry is in a period what's termed a hardening market. We've been in a soft market for about the past 11 or 12 years. That market continues to harden. We've been protected. The Florida School Boards Insurance Trust has been protected from that to some degree with rate guarantees that have been in place. Those are starting to go away as renewals come on in some of those individual policies.
insurance is becoming more scarce. Certainly, you see the number of disasters that you see nationally and even globally with wildfires, floods, Hurricane Michael here, even locally. There's a larger impact, and as a result, the insurance coverage that is provided, the reinsurance that is available on the market, that supply is tightened, and as a result, prices tend to increase. So that's the period, that's the environment that the insurance industry is operating in right now. So we're seeing some upward pressure there. So we try to control costs. It's even more important that we control costs as much as possible. FSBIT, in conjunction with Willis Towers Watson, which is the broker for the trust, has put together a program of $250 million in coverage. It's not an easy task. It involves traveling to the insurance markets in Bermuda and London to negotiate with insurance underwriters to get the best deal you possibly can and tell a great story. And that they feel like the folks at the trust have a good story to tell. We are doing things, we are taking measures, the things that Mr. Bryant and myself hear about and get training on each time we meet with the Florida with the trust folks, demonstrates that they're taking actions to make sure that all of the trust members receive as much loss control service as possible and try to hold down those costs wherever we possibly can. And with that, to share with you some of the examples further, one of the things that the trust did, the trust members, Mr. Bryant being the trust member for Okaloosa County, each of those trust members votes on what direction the trust will take with regard to technical issues and policy, administration, et cetera. One of the things that they did this year in trying to offset those increasing costs was they voted to considered and then voted ultimately to pass a resolution to take a $1.5 million distribution from surplus to help offset those costs. Our pro rata share of that was $210,000 roughly. So that was applied to our bill essentially to take that to help reduce the impact of those increases on the member districts. So that was helpful, and we're appreciative of that. Our average workers' compensation claim, I pulled some statistics just to give you a little bit of a snapshot as to where we're going. Last year, our average paid workers' compensation claim was right around $5,100 for this year. We're wrapping up this year, of course, here with a couple of weeks to go. We're at $2,675, so we're moving in the right direction there, controlling those costs, which is workers' compensation is by far and away the biggest cost that we've got as far as our property and casualty program is concerned. We're also pushing for more subrogation recoveries, working with the adjusters there to identify where someone may be liable to the school district. Certainly, even where we have transportation issues where a vehicle runs into us and it's their fault, runs into our bus. It may not do much damage to that bus, but it does some damage, and it's something that even though we may have, Mr. McInnes' staff is great, the folks that are in the shops at each of those transportation offices, our bus barns do a great job of keeping those buses on the road. They will, beat out a dent or, put a little paint and, or pull some parts from buses that we have in surplus. Even in those cases where we're not really directly involved in incurring a cost, I'm going ahead and having those folks, let's put together it's costing us something with regard to time and materials. We're taking those parts, let's put together something reasonable and get some recovery from those. So we're looking at that, and last year so far this year we've recovered $86,000 and just in making additional efforts at subrogation recovery. So we're really focusing on that just to help out. Every little bit does help. FSBIT, one of the folks from FSBIT, one of the safety loss control specialists from FSBIT has come over and done some playground inspections for us, helped us out there. They've also, one of the new toys they've gotten is they've gotten a drone and are getting an additional drone. They've done some drone surveys for us, which is very helpful. That provides information documenting things in the case you have an insurance claim. It helps out with the insurance carriers. It helps out with FEMA in establishing pre-loss condition and so forth. We're also exploring the possibility of using that. They've taken some really good 3D photography with some of the software that they've got that stitched together some pretty cool photos of some of our campuses, and we'll use those, trying to use those, see if we can utilize those in a security application as well. So we're looking at other uses of those capabilities they've got. They're going to enhance that for next year with a new drone they've got that's got infrared capability on it. It's a pretty high-priced drone, but it can do things like tell you where there's a roof leak or a potential roof leak with the infrared camera capabilities that they've got there. So that's something that we've got access to. One of the enhancements to the program is the pre-position contracts that they've got in place with resources that are available for the school district. Should we be in a situation like Bay County found themselves in, they've got ability of staging folks for emergency repairs to augment what we've already got in place. Certainly, you get in a situation like Bay County found themselves in, that can quickly be overrun. So we've got things out there that are in place now, plans that are in place now to help out and come right in and support the district, whatever their needs may be from an emergency standpoint, should the need arise, including what I thought was most interesting was someone to help with the administration of the FEMA, navigating the FEMA claims process. A dedicated individual, because if you've ever been involved with that, it can be very taxing and can be a draw on resources just to try to navigate that process. It's very difficult. So they have somebody that's experienced, actually used to work for FEMA, understands the system very well, and would actually come in, and that cost is included in what FEMA would actually pay. They would actually pay that individual to help process that claim for the school district. So that's something that is a great enhancement, I felt. Next year, we're looking at one of the things that FSBIT has done is they've created what they call an enterprise blueprint document. And that kind of provides a guideline as to what we're going to do with the risk management program going forward, sets goals, and then establishes means to achieve those goals. So we're working with them. That's a living document, something that we modify as needed going forward. So we work with FSBIT staff closely to develop that for Okaloosa County. So that's something that we'll use and kind of rely upon. One of the things that's come out of that is that I've kind of wanted to for some time get in this direction, but in the upcoming year and actually over the summer, what we'll start the process of doing is actually getting out to the schools and involving the principals, their staff, and their support staff in the risk management process and looking at school level issues that they've got, including reporting that we've worked with FSBIT staff to develop. We've got a risk management information system that's very detailed, provides good information on what's going on in our district as a whole. We're drilling down in that to get at the school level and be able to share that information with our principals and their staff so that they understand exactly what it is. Let's identify an issue or potential issue at your school and see what we can do to solve it and provide some relief there. Loss control mechanisms that could be put in place to help offset and mitigate the cost that the district's going to face as far as administering any claims that might result. So that's something that we'll be doing here. Like I said, we'll start that process over this summer. They're also FSBIT staff will also be available and will be coming in place over the summer to do some training for. We're looking at possibly doing some training with transportation. We have meetings there with our drivers coming in, as well as possibly our maintenance staff. So we'll be looking at those opportunities over the summer. So that's where we are at this point. If y'all have any questions.
I just have a comment again. And, the one thing that I was excited about when I first went to my first FSBIT meeting was the fact that they were, pushing the education part of training our people about workers' comp issues, risk management issues. And I think that's been a big plus for us since obviously the cost has gone down. And to me, that's a huge controllable expense that we can monitor if we're, one, properly training our employees to follow proper, procedures when it comes to their jobs. And but for me, it's just really been exciting to see the decrease in, the more of the awareness that's going around the district now.
Right.
So
That's right. We're hoping to prevent some of those and reduce our frequency of claims as
Right.
opposed to just, it's great to apply the claims handling techniques that they have and reduce the severity of those
Right.
claims. We also want to try to bend down that curve as far as frequency of claims so that they're not occurring at all. So that's what we hope to do with the process you described there.
I just
right.
want to thank you, Russ. I know that
Absolutely.
your job is a lot more convoluted than it looks on the surface, so thank you for what
Can
you
be.
do.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Frakes. All right, so moving on now to 8.55, Okaloosa County School Board Resolution Number 19-02 to adopt 457 deferred compensation plan documents presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Risk Management Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, moving on to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. 9.1, employees on administrative leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.2, deferred retirement option program drop, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. 9.3, out of field report for 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director, Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.4, administrative, managerial, and professional technical personnel recommendations for school year 2019-2020, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.5, personnel recommendations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, employment separations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.7, employee transfers, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
On this particular item, 9.7, I'll be recusing myself from voting on this particular item due to the fact that my wife is actually on this transfer sheet, and I have got the proper forms here that I will have filled out for Monday night's meeting.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right, moving on to 9.8, reinstatement, reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then 9.9, leave without pay, presented by Dr. Lee Hale, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. That brings us to Section 10, discussion agenda. We know we already have one item moved there at this time. There may be others. Section 11, construction program owners, representatives, business. This is a point, Mr. Desson, you've already spoken a little bit about your meeting. If you'd like to add something or wait till Monday night, or do both, take your preference.
Well, we've got a modification here in
All right.
a task order.
Okay.
And as we had been discussing, trying to move money from the canopies over to the security, and we will kick that one around.
Okay, all right, very good, very good.
I have a question for
Yes, sir.
Mr. Destin. A couple of meetings ago, we had a workshop regarding Lowry Place, and it was the direction of the board to try to find somebody who could go in and do an assessment of the building. Have we found somebody that is able?
I think we have.
Okay.
Dr. Smith had discussed with me earlier a potential candidate for that job, and who I think is an associate of the person who did one that Dr. White spoke about earlier. So
Okay.
I think we're working on that at the moment.
Okay, and that particular person, Dr. Smith, do you have the name of that person that we? And what are their credentials again?
We have requested and received a proposal from Dr. Renee Salazar, professor at the University of South Florida, PhD in industrial hygiene. He works for Salazar Consulting Group, and that's who we requested a proposal from, and I think I received it yesterday or the day before.
Okay, all right. And that's something I'm sure we'll bring up later on.
Absolutely, we'll
Okay.
have to vote on that.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. All right, colleagues, so we'll move on now to 11.2. Let me read these. Scope modification number 2 to TPM program number 6, task order number 2, pre-GMP district-wide school security upgrade project phase 1, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then 11.3, program 6, task order number 3, GMP for Flarosa Elementary School, parent pickup relocation traffic flow reconfiguration, presented by Dr. Bill Smith, Specialist Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Could I have Dr. Smith come up on that? And we've been working on this a long time over at Flarosa, so we're starting to see some things go. So if you just kind of brief us on that, please.
I already have the Faithful and Gould validation back, so as soon as this is voted on Monday, I'll issue a notice to proceed to Jacobs Titan to start the process. The market is really, really hot right now about getting bidders. We had to postpone the single point of entry bid by a week to get a bidder. So as soon as the notice to proceed is issued, the bids will go out and we'll secure someone to start doing the work.
Are you hoping that this will be done before school starts?
Yes,
Okay, good. That's great.
that's still our
Yeah.
target before kids show up.
Yeah, yeah.
Before
that'd be
buses and
great.
kids show up.
Well, that's the whole point, make it safer for these
That's-
students, and
that's
this has
correct.
been a long time coming, so I'm glad to see that happens to be one of the schools I represent, so I know Ms. Massey will be particularly proud. Thank you for that.
Key word, hoping.
Hoping.
Hoping, yes,
Hoping.
we're always
Well,
hoping,
Doc-
yes.
Dr. Smith, real quick, I know we talked the other day on the phone regarding this particular issue, but I think you were talking about it's a hot market out there. It's safe to say we're probably going to come under budget on this particular project.
This project did come in the budget on the estimate and is validated by Faithful and Gould. So we're good in that respect. We were going to bid a project yesterday, we've gotten no bidders. They delayed it, and we're hoping to get 2 bidders. So that's kind of what the market looks like. Everybody's asking for a lot of prices.
Very good.
Great.
All right, thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
All right, so now moving on to Section 12, Information Technology Seat Management Contract, 12.1 CACA Task Order Number 2-135, installation of 30 data drops at Pryor Middle School for new IT lab, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And then 12.2 CACI Task Order Number 2-137, AI Phone Video Intercom System, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, moving on, Section 13. Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
No report today.
Thank you. Superintendent, your report, sir.
Yes, sir. Have a few things. First of all, I do want to say, sometimes during the summer, I get the question, do the administrators work during the summer? And as you know, it's a busy time, so I do want to say, especially to a number of our specialists and program directors who are out there, there's a lot of work that occurs during the summer, and sometimes it's reports, sometimes it's getting the annual contracts ready to go. So it's a lot of time-consuming work, so very much appreciate the work that they're doing to make sure that we're prepared for the upcoming school year. I do want to say, when it comes to that Flarosa project, Dr. Smith has been absolutely fantastic with that. As you know, that was a comprehensive issue as it pertains to traffic. And I think we're proud as a school district to do our part with that. So I think the changes there will help, and I'm sure there's other changes that will come from other entities. But we've tried to do our part on that, and I think that'll be good for Flarosa and hopefully good for the traffic as well. This summer is busy with a lot of student activities, and I think you'll see, and a number of you have gone to some of these events already, which I appreciate. There's a lot of summer STEM camps that are going on from elementary to middle to our Summer Scholars Program, and it's interesting when you see the students and the smiles and how they're interacting with math and science. I think that is absolutely fantastic. So the STEM, the CTE is a major focus of ours, and we'll continue with that over the course of the summer into the next school year. I do want to say, received some information that I know that we're all proud of. We were designated once again as an academically high-performing school district, and that is based on the previous year's school and district grades. It's also based on our financial audit reviews, and it's also based on our class size compliance. And we've received this designation a number of years in a row, but once again, being a high-performing school district, I think that's something that we're all proud of, and that takes a lot of different individuals come into play for that to occur. Our teachers at the school levels and our administrators at the school level doing a great job educating our students, so we very much appreciate that. And of course on the finance side and the class compliance side. So it takes a team to run a school district, so that is something that I know that we're all very proud of. Also, I received a letter, and I think you all also received a letter from the mayor asking us about Lowry Place. And I did want to give you all an update kind of where we are. I have reached out to the mayor. We're playing a little bit of phone tag right now. But I've asked Mr. Horton to also set up a meeting to discuss the contents of that letter. So we will do so. I think you've kind of seen in there, in that letter, asking us about whether or not we're still open on selling that property, even with the potential of a 3 to 4 year lease back. So that is something I think it is important to respond back to the mayor and to the city, and we will do so, and we'll set up a meeting and have those discussions. And just definitely wanted to let you know where we were on that. And bear with me 1 second. And the last thing I would say, I shared with you all, thank you, Mr. Destin. I shared with you all the last meeting that we had a safety roundtable that was coming up. We had that safety roundtable discussion. 2 other counties were a part of it, the sheriff's office as well. So we had an excellent meeting that day and discussions. And I think just our district as well as the other districts, I think are working hard in making student safety a #1 priority. Thank you.
All right, very good, Superintendent. And so that brings us to Section 15, Board Members' Announcements and Requests for Information. And Mr. Destin, I'll start with you, sir, if you have anything else.
I don't think I have any this morning, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryant?
Just two things real quick. I'll echo what Mr. Chambers said about our staff working behind the scenes. They are doing an awesome job, especially with everything that's going on over the summer. It's a busy time. So, but I will say that we do have a really good staff, and they're doing the best they can out there, and we appreciate that. Also, last week I went to the joint conference of the Florida School Board Association and the superintendents, and I did post this on my Facebook page and on my social media accounts, but I do want to give each board member a copy since I am the representative for the legislative representative. But this is the legislative platform progress report, and just pass that down, and that gives everybody. Oops,
Got something else? I need that paperwork. Coming your way.
and I'll get it down to y'all.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that's.
All right. All right, Dr. Kelly, I'll turn to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chambers mentioned about everything happening in the summer, and that's certainly true. We are only, though, 52 days away from school, from students returning. So I know for me, as a former administrator, that was always something I kind of counted down. And the days go faster as we get closer to that. And I will say that I have visited some of those summer activities, and I think, in fact, yesterday, I think Amy was leaving as I was pulling up to Pryor. So it is exciting to see the students and the teachers out there working so hard in the summer, and the students being so excited about what they're learning, and hopefully will increase their summer achievement growth. I know that's what the ultimate intent is. I also visited yesterday, or maybe day before now, Desta Middle School's annual Nuts and Bolts Conference that they host. It's an international middle school conference. I always enjoy going because some of my favorite educational authors and researchers and presenters are there yearly. I got to see Rick Wormley and Jack Breckmeyer. If you don't know these, and Mark McLeod, if you don't know these researchers and authors, maybe you should look them up because they are some of the most exciting and entertaining researchers currently in education. For instance, when I was in Rick Wormley's session yesterday, he did a piece on why you should allow makeup work. And he said the opposite of what people think, that, oh, you're giving the students an easy out and giving the parents an easy okay, but the way you do it is important. And he said, for instance, that he always allows makeup work, but he requires the parents to sign off on it with a reason why, and the students to say how they will differently attack the problems in their second attempt. So a number of those things can be best practices you can just absorb in just a minute of listening to some of these researchers. That's why I love these particular ones so much, and that we have an international workshop series going on in our backyard, and we don't even take that much advantage of it ourselves traditionally. And just to say, I got a call yesterday. I think I left you some communication, Mr. Chambers, from Okaloosa's Public Library Consortia. I used to serve on that board, so they felt comfortable reaching out to me. I know that you'll want to designate someone on your staff to talk to them, but I think they had a very good idea in that they were simply requesting that we think about having a memorandum of understanding or of agreement, whichever you think is most appropriate, so that their branch librarians located in our cities could have easy access and communication and collaboration with our school libraries when they have a special event or host a library card sign-up day or whatever, instead of every year, every separate branch having to communicate with every separate media specialist or principal. So just something to think about.
Good. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Ms. Evanche?
Yes. The Superintendent, when you're talking about our performance, is that the ranking and the grade? Is that what that is that you're talking about?
It's a component, so it's the school grades, it's the district grades as well.
Okay, so I know we have a ranking in the state too.
Mhm.
Was that as well?
It's not necessarily the ranking,
Okay.
it's our own individual from the FSA to the state EOCs and all the components of the
Okay.
school grades, and then how that then translates to a district grade.
And when do we anticipate school grades coming?
So school grades, so first of all, we're hoping that the individual school grades come out, the individual school information comes out here shortly. So we're hoping that tomorrow, or if the worst case scenario next week, schools will get all the scores of the individual students, and then we'll be able to start breaking down that data. As you know, Joe Peterson, he'll start crunching all of that information, so we're very hopeful on that. I think I keep asking Mr. Horton each day, has the data come yet? But it hasn't.
Yeah.
And then after that, Mr. Horton, then there's a time period when the actual school grades come out shortly after that.
Thank you. Okay. Yesterday I attended the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation. Ms. Gates, would you come up a minute, please? And as I am the representative from our board on that, and wanted to update everyone on that foundation. I haven't spoken about it in a while, but we're getting rolling again, and great things. We're working on our new year membership. One of the events we do is in cooperation with our schools is the Cram the Van. And like you said, 52 days will go quickly, get those school supplies, so we'll be working in the community on that. But Ms. Gates, if we could share, you're probably better with the numbers. I'm real excited about our goals for the Take Stock in Children's scholarships that we talked about yesterday, if you could help me with that.
I can do that. So, in Take Stock, as far as the students and the student numbers and how we are funded legislatively, it's all about numbers. And years ago, we would have anywhere from 100 to 140 students at one time in the program. So that would be 9 through 12. And that brought in a lot of legislative dollars to help us with those students, but also to help us get some matching dollars. In the last 3 years, those numbers have gone down drastically. We were down to projecting 15,000, it's sort of projection. Well, 15,000 doesn't even pay for the 4 full scholarships. So when I went in the time frame that I went in, February, March, Nicole Snyder, who does that, we sat down and looked at it, and she said, well, I think I should project 18. I go, oh no, we're going to project 60,000, because I looked back on some of the other years. And she looked at me like, I said, oh no, we can do this. So 60,000, she brought in a full crop of 22, 24 students as 9th graders. So you'll see then, and we'll come in the fall, I'm going to let her do a presentation, that her 9th grade group for next year is large again. But the 10, 11, and 12th grade groups had gotten down to 8 students, total of 8 students, a total of 12 students. So our total looks to be like 57 right now. So we have to build that back up. We are way more robust. We have certainly have plenty of more students that need that support, and our community's ready to step out and help us do that. Nicole's in the community. They are beginning to know who she is, and we are going to organizations together to talk, and I see that we're starting to see the fruits of that happening. And so we are going to go big or not go at all, is what I said to her. But she, and we have some new board members coming on that are bringing some new young energy and different types of energy from different parts of the county. So I'm excited about where we're going to be going this year. Bob Bennett has graciously going to serve another year as the chair as we transition with some new people and grow some new officers over this year. But lots of great things, and our numbers are already looking so much better just in the last 6 to 8 months. So excited about that. Mr. Bennett wants to come to you again in the fall about the same time I think he came last year to give you a report on the foundation and take stock. Any questions?
Thank you, yeah, and we're also looking for mentors. I know the different ones on the board have been mentors, and maybe some of you out there, but we're always looking for community partners for mentoring these students. We have a great program, so if you would like to be a mentor, contact Nicole there at the...
You can contact Nicole, you can contact me, but we are always looking for mentors
Right.
and working on that and working on a mentor training.
Yeah, it's a great program, and it really helps those students so much. Thank you, Ms.
No,
Gates.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hold on, Ms.
Okay.
Gates. Mr. Bryant?
No, she answered the question. I was
Okay.
going to mention about we need mentors. We always need mentors. So.
Mr. Chambers?
And I did want to add, so the foundation board, so it has been a little smaller, but it's a hard-working, smaller group. Ms. Vanchek has come on and has done a great job and being a supporter for that, so very much appreciate it. Ms. Gates has really worked hard when she talked about really getting those 9th grade numbers up to the number that she said. I was like, oh, okay. But she's doing that and in revitalizing that program, getting more board members on there again from the community. I think that is crucial, and it's an important part of our school district, so to speak. So I do appreciate the work, Ms. Vanchek. I do appreciate the work, Ms. Gates, and your staff.
Thank you very much.
And real quick, if you can't support the foundation through volunteering, you can always get a license plate.
Or write a check.
Or write a check. But a
One
license,
scholarship, $4,000.
but they actually have the new one out now. So if you
No, the news, you're right, the license tag is great.
Yeah.
I think we're up to about $1,400 just for the new one that we've already gotten that money, and that takes a little while for it to come in.
Right.
But that's, it's not restricted,
Right.
and we can spend it on teachers and students and things that they need and do in their classrooms. So we really are helping teachers get some money that they need, but we're helping support the scholarship program and students and getting them things that they need. So it's kind of a 3-prong attack there. Anything else?
All right, very good. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Gates. Anything else, Ms. Vanchek?
No,
You
thank
good?
you.
All right, very good. All right, so that takes us to section 16 on public comment. We have none of that at this juncture, and so I'm about prepared to adjourn this meeting unless there's anything else. Mr. Attorney, Mr. Chambers, we're good, you're in. Colleagues, we're all good, staff? All right, this meeting's adjourned.